Okay, hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about how do I build an API with Go. So I guess most people here are quite familiar with API. So the talk here is more about like how I learned Go and how I come from another language in Go and how do I build API with it. And it's more like a learning experience sharing. So firstly, I talk a little bit about overview of my presentation. So like API requirement, what's the components for it? So this one just roughly because I know most people have their own favorite ecosystem. The core of it will be I share about my first attempts and the second attempt on how do I build this thing. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the interface-oriented design, which I find is very useful to build a high-level API. And I will be using the design principle here to build like simple CRUD and also on the other stuff like caching, query, authentications. Okay, so how do I build an API? So for example, I'm not sure if you know about Park. So Park is a really nice company that they build the mobile friendly API for the people to connect to it. And since I learned about Go, and then I think that maybe I built something like similar to Parks. And since they got the design really well done, maybe I try to simulate those things. So a few things I find out about well-designed API. For example, here they are very mobile friendly. They are ready to use CRUD, easy to query, authentication, access control. So basically, you need very little thing to get started. Because, for example, you just define your own model, and after that you can persist your data directly to the database on the server, and you got the API for free. So here I found a few open source on for Go. For example, here is the mux to route the request to a controller, the GOM to interact with SQL database, session to handle authentication, but those things are not very necessary. You can swap to another of your own implementation later. Okay, so my first attempt. So for example, in my first attempt, I find, for example, we had an API. In this example, we have like /article and create. So we post data, for example, a JSON in the request body to this URL, and this URL this one's supposed to route the request to the correct handler. Populate the article with the JSON body and then save it to the database. Okay, so that's simple. It sounds simple enough. So my approach is, for example, we see the article, so we know, okay, this guy wants to create an article. So how do I know that this guy wants to create an article when I'm a framework? So I don't know the application model in advance, right? So what I'm always thinking is that I will extract the article from the URL, and after that I try to instantiate the article struct, and then I populate with the request body, and then I save it to database. Okay, so that sounds simple enough, but turns out it's very hard to do in Go. So for example, most of the language has some way to do it with reflection. So for example, given a string, then you have a class. For example, Objective-C have NS class, Java also have class of phoneme, Python, and almost all the other languages, they have the reflection quite powerful. My experience in Go is that there's no easy way to instantiate a struct from a string unless I try to mess up with this. I try to go around, like for example, I have a map, I register some struct with some certain string, and then I match. For example, I extract the article from the URL and then I try to see a struct from there. But that is really messy, and the reflection is really hard because when you look at the reflection API, then you see you have to deal with interface, you have to do with element, pointer, value, and all these things are kind of crazy. And with the strong type system in Go that make typecasting is real pain. So in here, I feel like I'm trying to fighting with the system. I try to fight with the Go. Go must have some kind of idiom that I'm not used to it yet, and I don't know what is it. So I stopped my first attempt for a while. yeah, I always feel like fighting with the language, so I stopped like a month or so without doing anything else. But then I come to think about this, and I read an article that even past they build the API in Go. Previously, I think they built it in Node.js or something, but after that they also rebuild in Go. So I mean, these things are not that hard, right? And I read some other article, and I come up with I come up, not really I come up, but I found out some idea about like, interface-oriented design. So in previous example that we see, for example, slash article. So the framework, they don't know the article in advance, because article is a model from the applications. So application is one layer below the framework. So framework is supposed to be higher level. So it doesn't know about application model. So how do they deal with this? So there's a way to know about the model in advance that you define a lot of interface. So for example, you want your model to, as long as they perform some action according to what you want, then you can use that. And it's more like the framework tell that, hey, this is my requirement. You just go and implement whatever requirement that I need. Then it's gonna be okay for me. Okay, so for now I define a few interface here. For example, here get supporter, post supporter, where it's very small interface where you have the get method and the post method, and most other thing you can define here. For example, head supporter, post supporter, and delete supporter. It depends on your request type, and it just take the two parameters, the writer and the request, and also it produce something like the response code. For example, is it success like 200, or is the error like 404 or something. The interface here is some kind of response that you can serialize with JSON, and error from some case that it doesn't, it that has some error happening. So maybe I just after we define the interface, so we can think in my mind that for example, if the application model, they have some form, some struct like test user here. So we can just make it really easy to conform to the post supporter interface, right? So here we just create a method for the test user struct that take two parameters, is the writer and also the request, and also return the correct the requirement from the framework. So in this case, I return go to create. So this one is more for like implementation. So how do we use interface? So now we already have something that we expect that this one should take from the request method, and it should produce some kind of result. And we need to connect these things together. So for example, in this case, if the request coming in, I try to define a handler, and I check the request method. If it's a post, then I check whether this resource is it conform to an interface or not. So if it conform to interface, then I have a handler equal to resource.post, and then after that I use and after that we can use the handler here we can invoke the handler to get the response. For example, the interface that you see previously, and we can get that to render the JSON back to the client. And how do we route the URL to the correct model? So in the previous example, you can see this function group handler, it returns HTTP the handler func. So this thing actually you can use, this thing is a standard HTTP standard class for HTTP package, and we can use the API. The group handler model here will return a handler function, and that you can use that as a parameter to handle functions. Okay, that's very hard to pronounce. So for example, so after we put a lot of things in, so for now, after the application, we can define all the methods that it's gonna support. For example, get, post, or put, But there's a lot of common functions. For example, in Java, for example, you can have a lot of, you can have a common model, and then you can inherit your model to that common model. But there's no inheritance in Go, so anything you want to reuse, you have to try to, you more like you have to put a useful function in the package. So for example, if you come out from Java, it's more like you put all your functions in the state, more like a static functions in a separate package. So I found that that is the only way we can have some common, we can reuse some common code because we have no inheritance. So we have to put it in the package, and it always have to kind of a bit repetitive. Yeah. Okay, so for example, now we want to support the caching. So using the principle I described before. So firstly, we always define something like an interface. So anything that conforms to the interface, and after that we provide some kind of specific implementation for the interface. For example, in this case, we had a cacher interface that have get, set, delete, and exist. So the cacher, for example, if we have the implementation for Redis that conform to this cacher, we can register that for the for Redis. But if we want for something that sometimes we want to switch implementation to member cache, as long as we have something that conform to that interface, we can swap implementation. Similarly, we can have define a lot of other custom interface. Like if we want to support query, we can also define a query supporter. And the usage is also quite simple, is that we define functions for the struct that handle the query. Yeah, so I guess you kind of get used to what I'm trying to talk about here, is that in Go is more like, if you want to design a higher level framework, you should try to define some kind of interface first, and then you try to provide some implementation for that interface, so that later you can easily to swap it to another implementation. And then secondly is that you it's more flexible, because you know what is the application going to provide to you, and you can have that instead of using the reflection. Okay, so it's quite a short one. So yeah, the project is posted on the GitHub, so you can take a look if you like. Okay.
Yeah, any more questions?
Have you implemented the RESTful API?
Yeah, it's a RESTful API.
RESTful authentication using, like, you implemented the JWT for authentication?
What is JWT actually?
JSON Web Token. Okay, never. I want to ask about that because I want to implement something about it.
Yeah, so for example, if you look at this thing, authentications, so we have a register, login and logout interface.
What is different?
Okay.
Oh, so that's your talk next time.
I still have one question that I haven't found.
Any more questions?
Answer.
Alright, let's thank Thomas for the presentation about the API.